I love the word perceptions, yes, because certainly lack of transparency in many emerging markets is an issue. It's not one that we should hide or discount, but I think perception is much greater than the reality. I've personally worked for over 11 years before setting up Africa GreenCo as a project finance lawyer on a number of projects in the energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa. There are a number of counterparties in sub-Saharan Africa, most in my opinion and in my experience, that really want to work in a very transparent and open manner and are open to being approached about certain issues that might be of concern that they need to be laid out in clarity. That are very open to be approached like that, especially if the approach is, again, transparent. I think the sensitivity issue, everybody likes to be treated as an equal, and as an equal they like to be treated as counterparties that can be asked certain difficult questions. So, and it goes vice versa as well. Because corruption, of course, goes both ways. And it's often not at the hands of only the local governments, which is the perception, but also at the hands of many companies which have played that role. Thus, the very serious laws in the US and the UK Corruption Act, which focus on effectively bringing to liability the UK companies which engage in that type of behavior. President Adesina of the African Development Bank said it very well when he launched something called the New Deal on Energy for Africa. We cannot power Africa with potential. You know, potential is there, but what has actually happened over the past 20, 30 years? And when we look at what has happened, very little has happened. So I think we've had 59 IPPs, so independent power projects, over the last 20 years. The current level of investment is about 4.5 billion a year. We require 70 in generation, distribution and transmission to achieve electrification targets set by the African Development Bank, which is 160 gigawatts by 2025. So the challenge is huge, not because there is no potential, not even because there is no technology, but because the fact is that there is very few bankable projects, that the funding models might not be quite there. So that takes us to challenges. And the many challenges are, I think, from the private sector perspective, it will be the lack of creditworthy off-takers, which are the purchasers of power. This power has to be, if it's grid connected, off-taken on a very long-term basis. For that, we need risk allocation structures that are bankable. And for that, we very often, because of the lack of creditworthy counterparties, need extensive sovereign guarantees and other type of structures. So effectively, what we have currently is a development of renewable energy and other energy projects, which are equally important, through a manner and a funding model which moves the risks of the uncreditworthy entity onto the balance sheet of very heavily indebted governments. And then when you combine that with the current macro position and situation in sub-Saharan Africa, which is that most countries are very heavily indebted, the current funding model is really unsustainable going forward if we are to reach any of the electrification tactics. We used to think that obviously energy has to come first, and clearly it does for proper functioning of any urban areas. But I think the more and more there is investment focus on actually urban structures and cities themselves in sub-Saharan Africa, one triggers the other. So we have seen, and hopefully will continue to see, a very beneficial correlation between the two. We really have to have a much more also holistic approach and looking at these issues. Our conversations are too disconnected currently when it comes to funding models and when it comes to these important synergies. We really have to look at an integrated approach that looks at urban development, energy needs, within energy at generation, transmission and distribution requirements in order to help set and achieve the goals that we all here to achieve, both for the benefit of the development of the continent and also to find those opportunities of the many companies, especially in Norway, that can really bring the expertise and especially technical expertise when it comes to renewable energy development, hydro development and other services.
Thought leader, our minds are awakening. Thought leader, our worlds are waiting. Thought leader, a vision for tomorrow. built on the dreams of two.